All right, hello everyone. I'm going to share this video into the event just to make sure people know where we are. But say hi when you're here so I know everything is working. And this is the first time I've sat at my desk all year. It's only January 3rd. But I took totally off last week, which was really great. So I'm still kind of warming up, I think, to being alive again. I see someone liked the video, so I'm assuming everything is working okay. I just want to post this link in the event because every now and then people get confused. Okay. All right, very good. I see that there are 6 people here. Hello, hello, hello. Oh, it's all clients. I love that. I missed you guys. Lindsay, Kate, Elizabeth, and Bethany. Good to see all of you. I love that so much. Thank you guys so much for just being here. Happy New Year. I'm excited about this training. I think I'm just going to jump right into it. You get confused every time. um, Yes, the internet is a confusing place, Elizabeth. And it's also confusing because I'm not consistent in where I do these things, and so I'm not helping you at all. Yeah, Happy New Year. It's good to see you guys. I wanted to do this training for our monthly workshop, and the monthly workshops are where we do, like, we're on Zoom and I do live coaching, and it's a little bit more involved. I have like a whole funnel set up for it. Hello, Megan. And when I posted a poll asking you guys what workshops you wanted, you didn't vote for this one. And I still wanted to do it. So I decided just to make it an extra live event. And then we'll have our like big main workshop next week that is copywriting, which is what you guys actually wanted. I think a lot of you wanted this too. And we can always do all of it, but I wanted to do this at the beginning of the year because it felt more relevant. Or it felt not more relevant, but it felt relevant. Happy New Year. Okay, I'm still trying to customize my screen. I like to see that everything, I like to see things how you're seeing them, and I like to see them where I can see all the comments. Um, yes. Okay, well, I guess we'll just kind of jump in. This replay will, I think, live live in the group. I was thinking about taking it down, and if I do take it down, I'll make an announcement. And I'm going to try to keep this to an hour, although there is a meditation I want to include, and so I may just record that separately if we end up going over, because I have a meeting in an hour and a half. So hopefully I don't go 2 hours. But hey, Maddie, yes, I'm excited about this topic, and I'm excited to see you here too. So my beliefs, and this will continue to evolve, but the way that I see manifesting and the way that I manifest has evolved so much. And I think I'm pretty transparent about that process. And like, you guys have, a lot of you have been here with me since 2019 and have messaged me and commented in the last year on like how much things have changed and how exciting it is for you to follow. And I just had somebody join the Worthy of Wealth Mastermind in December who was like, I just love how you've like evolved and changed. And she's someone who's very successful, and I think that's true about a lot of my clients. Well, I think that's true about all of my clients and all of you watching this, whether you're a client or not, is that you will be successful whether or not you ever work with me, whether or not you watch this video. But having a guide, you can always be successful a little bit faster with a little bit more ease. But I really appreciate that feedback that I've gotten, that like, I love watching your evolution. I'm going on a tangent that is not on my notes already, but the way that I've manifested has changed a lot. And I used to create what I wanted through a lot of force. And if something wasn't working, I would apply more force. And that worked. So I bought an $8,000 product in 2017. And that was like the most expensive thing I ever bought in my life besides like a car or college. And I got a personal loan to buy that, and I learned a lot in that investment. It did not really ROI for many years. And so I was a little bit bummed. At the time, I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But then in 2019, I invested in a coach, and that paid off. And then I invested in a $9,000 mastermind in November of 2019. And that was one of those investments where it was a short time frame for a $9,000 investment. So it was like a sprint. And when I made that investment, I felt a ton of pressure. I felt a lot of stress, and it worked out. And so because that worked out, and because that was my first experience really learning mindset in a masterful way, that's what I thought manifesting and mindset really was like, I just have to like freak myself out to force myself into action, and that's how I'll make a lot of money. Is my mic peaking at all? Just let me know, because I have the mic pretty close to me and I can always move it away a little bit. Um, and so that worked. Like that was that was a way to make money, and I made a lot of money, and I had as much as a $60,000 a month. But my nervous system, and I didn't know this at the time, but my nervous system was like totally getting dysregulated. And I ended up kind of quasi burning out. I wouldn't say that I fully burned out. I did fully burn out at one point in the last like 6 years, but I don't think I fully burned out in 2021, but it was like an emotional burnout. And I had a month in 2021 where I had $0 in new sales. And that was still when I was taking a lot of frantic action. And I was like, okay, something has got to change. I also, man, this is like a really long tangent, but my process and how I've manifested has changed a lot. And it's changed a lot out of necessity. That's what I'm trying to get at. It didn't change because I was like, I would love a more flowy way to manifest. It changed because I was like, holy shit, I made $0 in sales and I can't live my life this way because I'm not going to go back to a job. That was when I was like, something's got to change. But I still kept doing the same thing, investing in expensive masterminds, taking like a lot of frantic action, nervous system totally dysregulated. And by that, I mean, what I described as the pattern that I was in, I like to call it my anxiety cyclone, where like I would feel so much anxiety and I would just feel like I was spiraling, and I felt like I couldn't slow down, couldn't take a break, couldn't get out of that panic mode. And that's ultimately what led me to be forced to slow down. And that happened really pretty early in this year. I was in a mastermind that was, you might have heard me tell this story before, but the mastermind was $7,000 a month. And with the other expenses and things I had going on at that time, that was like really, really hard to maintain. And I was able to start doing like consistent $30,000 to $40,000 sales months because of that, because of the investments I was making. But it wasn't like I had all this overflow. It was like I was trying to survive these expenses that I had, and they weren't expenses that are necessary. Like, anyway, so when I was released from that mastermind ended up dissolving for various reasons, and I was so grateful. That was when I was like, okay, I am finally uncomfortable enough that I'm willing to do something different. And learning to manifest the way that I learned to manifest success last year is one of the hardest, most rewarding things I've done. Like slowing down enough to be like, I physically am incapable of forcing a crap ton of action. And so I'm just going to have to sit and wait for things to come together. So that's the process I'm sharing with you today, is like how to slow the heck down. So the first thing in manifesting, this concept is really important for you to grasp, and it can be really painful to grasp if you don't believe this already. So I just want you to hang on with me, and everything I say today, just take it with a grain of salt. Absorb what you like, leave the rest behind, and it will all circle around when it's supposed to for you in your own journey. But the first concept that's really important that you start to begin to grasp is that you are the creator of your own reality. I am the creator of my own reality. This is really, really painful when you have a reality that you don't like. And that's like, at a high level for me, that's like, oh, I'm not making the money I want, or I manifested a bunch of debt and now I have to get out of it, and that sucks and I'm mad about that. But that's even more painful when you've dealt with like abuse or violence in your life, or someone really close to you passes away and it feels like they've been ripped from your life. I mean, you're not responsible for those kinds of things. So what I want to say about the fact that you're the creator of your own reality is that it's hard to take control over your success if you feel like you are powerless over it. But if you want the control over your success, you have to take responsibility for the things you want to change too. This doesn't mean you're responsible for the bad behavior of others. That's what I was saying when I just mentioned abuse, which is like a heavy topic to bring in the first 12 minutes of this training. But you're not responsible for people's bad behavior, right? It is true that the world is unfair, and it's more unfair for some people than others. Okay, so I just want to acknowledge that. And we still get to choose our actions, choices, and beliefs moving forward. And it's also true that choosing those actions, behaviors, and beliefs is harder for some people than others, right? Some of us we have more barriers in life than other people. And that's also true. But so with all of those caveats said, just recognizing I'm not responsible for other people's bad behavior. It's less fair for some people than for others. It's harder for people than it is for others, right? Like, we want to acknowledge all those things. And it's still true that we are the creators of our reality. So I just want you to recognize that both can be true. Like, the world can be unfair and suck, and I can still be the creator of my own reality, responsible for my success, and responsible for changing the things I don't like. Your life now is a manifestation of your past energy and choices, right? Are you guys all following? Is this just like, I hear a couple of like, okay, I'm glad we're a fan of tangents. Kate, that was a very long intro tangent. And Lindsay, it sounds like some of that was resonating. So, oh, did I just click out of my live? Oh my gosh, I thought I just ended the live. That would have been horrible. I accidentally clicked on Lindsay's name and went to her profile, and I thought I ended the live. So it seems like all this is making sense. I see some hearts. So in order for manifesting to be successful for you long term, like, you can manifest and do it half-ass. You can do anything half-ass. Anything worth doing is worth doing half-ass. I don't remember who the first person who said that was, but that's like my new favorite thing. Anything worth doing is worth doing half-ass. Same thing with manifesting. It can work with a half-ass approach. But if you want your manifesting to be powerful and potent, the first step is recognizing that you are the creator of your own reality. And that the reality that you have today was born of decisions and other things that you manifested. Like, it is the result of what you've manifested from the past. And so instead of poo-pooing on yourself for being in a bad situation, or poo-pooing on yourself because you have something you don't want, I would just start to get curious in this step around, like, seeing something that happens in your life and being like, did I create that? So, like, one of my things, I've always been like super against debt. And over time, I had to be challenged around that over and over again. The first time I had to be challenged around that was when I bought a house. Like, a house is a really good financial decision. We had a good interest rate, but it was like the first time I went into debt since college. And it was like, oh, I have to get a little bit challenged around having debt. And then I was still like, there was years, like, my husband has debt from a past business from ages ago, and he's paid down a crap ton of it, but he still has it. And I used to really feel like, kind of shame him for it, or be like, oh, I can't believe that happened to him. And then in my business, I got that personal loan in 2017. I paid that off really early, within a couple of years. And then through a series of unfortunate events, I went into debt again. And I totally manifested that. I totally manifested that by believing that debt is the worst thing in the world, by being stressed out about not having money constantly. And I manifested that through a series of like, lack of awareness. And so that was part of the healing work I did this year, was like, I had to practice just getting really comfortable looking at money. I knew how to make a lot of money, but I was still like avoiding it, which I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit. But in this step of like, the first rule of manifesting is that you're responsible. You are the creator of your own reality. You are the creator of your own reality. And if you don't believe that yet, I would just start to get curious around looking at the things in your life now and just thinking, curious, detachment, right? We're not like, don't attach to it. Don't get all stressed out about it. Don't take it on as your whole identity, but just get curious around, did I create that? Yeah, Lindsay, I hear you. And sometimes, so Lindsay says, I did that this year, of being afraid to look at money. This is why in the mastermind that I have, Worthy of Wealth, like, there are people at lots of different income, like, everyone in there is a full-time entrepreneur. But people are at all different income levels, because the problems that they face are the same, where like the once you make a lot of money, it's like, oh, great, I made a lot of money. But then there's this whole other set of problems that come in, where like, oh, I made a lot of money, but now I don't feel safe with it. Like, I had a client who was just wildly successful, and she ended up she had a $200,000 month while we were working together. And She ended up having to take a break for months because her nervous system was so dysregulated. And that was before I was really deep into this work. If I was working with her again today, I would say, like, okay, now that you have the money you have, let's like practice somatic work and practice calming down and practice leaning back. Megan said manifestation is so hard for me to understand because of all these things: depression, oppression, the natural unfairness of the world makes me feel like we have no power. But I'm realizing this is actually black and white thinking. Just because we can't control everything doesn't mean we're totally powerless. Finding my power over the last few years has been life-changing. Megan, this is so relatable. And it is, instead of like I'm in control or I'm out of control, that's black and white thinking. I'm either in control or I'm out of control. Instead of thinking that way, I'm in control, and there are some things that I'm out of control of, but I can still determine the end result. That's why when we manifest, we want to visualize what we want and tap into the feeling of what we want and release how that happens, because we aren't in control of, like, we can't control other people. But both are true. You can't control a lot of the negative things. And that's what I was alluding to earlier, of like, manifesting is going to be easier for some people and harder for some people because of just like where we were born or what we were raised with, or like the like oppression, right? And depression, but also like well, I won't. Yeah, you guys gender inequality, racial inequality. There's just so many different things that can work against us, and like I can't. Those unfairnesses do exist, and I still get to be the creator of my reality. Duality, and we'll come back to duality again. So the next step, and that you can build on this, because I realize again that may not be easy for all of you to accept right now, especially if you're new to manifesting, but you have to know that you're the creator of your own reality. And you have to also know that like life isn't fair. But you're not, the way that I used to see my relationship to my higher power, when I was growing up, the way that I felt was like this guppy in an ocean, just powerless, floating around. And then like sometimes prayer works and sometimes it doesn't. And I have free will, but like I feel like I can't control anything. And like just changing how I saw that was so helpful. So step number 2 is addressing limiting beliefs and giving them space. So your brain, and I heard this from Carrie Michelle, is one of the mentors in this somatic certification I just finished. But one thing that she said that like I just loved how playful this was that your brain is software, not hardware, meaning it can change. So your brain is wired, but it is flexible. We can change it. And I posted this on Instagram yesterday, but trauma changes your brain. Depression, oppression, natural unfairness, those are trauma, and that changes your brain, but healing changes your brain too. And so that I find very encouraging. And there's another book that talks about this a lot called Habits of a Happy Brain. And I just found that book, Habits of a Happy Brain, so encouraging, because I'm like, all these negative things in your life and trauma and bad experiences and weird childhoods that can change your brain in a negative way, but that those pathways to improve them always exist. And as you get older, it can get slower, but you can still always change your brain and heal. However, it takes commitment and devotion. So one of the things I like to look at, I'm guessing most of you have heard and done some work in limiting beliefs. So just comment yes or limiting beliefs in the comments so I know that you understand what limiting beliefs are, because I'm assuming I'm not going to go into detail on like what is a limiting belief. But there's a deeper level of limiting beliefs that was keeping me stuck. So I created a course called Success Mindset Mastery in probably 2019 or 2020. I'm thinking it was 2020. And that course is still like in my blog coaching program, which I ran for 3 years. That was the first training that got before the blog training. And that was still the mindset training that I had in the blog coaching program resulted in more testimonials, or as many testimonials as the other training on like traffic and growing your email list and all of that did. And it's still a really powerful training, but it has a limit. So there's limiting beliefs that are like, I believe that there's a limited amount of money. And so if I make money, I'm taking money from someone else. That's a limiting beliefs. And that's not true. Money is an unlimited resource. And if you don't believe that, I could probably go into a whole other tangent. But anyway, okay, so all of you know what limiting beliefs are. And if you don't watching the replay, then just comment and I'll reply or someone will reply. But there's this other layer of limiting beliefs. And if you're in the Worthy of Wealth Mastermind, you have a workbook on this, but I call it the money mapping system, where there's all of these other learned behaviors that we have around money that may not be like easily recognizable as limiting beliefs. So I like to bucket them as, and there's three, and I always forget the third one, but I just renamed it in my notes here. So toxic agreements, resentments, and then like other, like looking at family and relationships. So toxic agreements are agreements that we make that nobody really asked us to make. So a toxic agreement could be, I don't want to make more money than my partner, right? So nobody asked you to do that. It doesn't really help anybody, but it's this underlying unspoken agreement that's not helping you, that you feel like you can't cross. I had a colleague of mine, I don't know if I'll say her name. I was going to say her name. A colleague of mine, she became the breadwinner of her family for a few years. And that was like a really hard change for her. I think if she'd had the option to be the breadwinner or not, she would have and she probably had done this subconsciously for many years, where even though she was very capable of making more money than her partner, she was kind of like subconsciously not aiming bigger because she didn't want to be the breadwinner because of this toxic agreement. And so then, yeah, Kate, this training, it's painful. So it'll be good to do somatic sessions like after you go through the workbook, because there might be some uncomfortable things that come out of it. But I think if she had tried to become, so at one point she had to become the breadwinner. And what that forced her to do, it forced her to look at this of like, oh, this is really painful. Being the breadwinner is really painful. And then she had to look at, why is that painful? And it's because I believe that like I shouldn't make more money than my partner. It makes me feel safe that somebody else is taking care of me. That's another thing that I've had to deal with, was like, when I was making at the times when I made more, my husband's doing really well right now in his business. But in the times where I was making more than him, it was like, oh, I don't want to take care of someone else. I want someone else to take care of me. Although then when he was making more than me, it was equally uncomfortable to be like, oh, I need someone to step in and help me a little bit. Neither of them are comfortable. Anyway, so that's one example of a toxic agreement. Another one is I have to retire my parents. Another one is there's lots of toxic agreements you can have. And feel free to list any other examples in the comments. Another one is resentments. So there's a lot of like resentments that I had. Like a lot of my resentments were showing up around, to be perfectly frank, my parents. I had some resentments around my parents for finances. And then also bosses was like the other big one. And so when you look at resentments, again, the beautiful thing about looking at resentments is that you can take responsibility for everything that happens in those relationships. So one example is like, I manifested multiple bosses. Actually, almost all of my bosses, besides the very first full-time job I had, were underpaying me for the responsibility that I had. And I was even getting hired in this premise. Like I knew that I was getting underpaid, but they were promising growth, bonuses, this or that never paid out. And so I felt resentful at those bosses because I was working for a promise that I never got. And so when you look at a resentment, the beautiful thing about that is you can say, here's the thing that happened. I got hired in a job where they promised me one thing and they gave me another, and I'm mad about it. And then I can say, oh, this is interesting because it happened over and over again. What's the common denominator? This guy. Who's the common denominator? It's not the bosses, it's me. And so I can look at, okay, so what's my part in that? And my part in that is that I kept accepting jobs that were underpaying me because I didn't feel worthy of getting paid what I should have been getting. Megan says, toxic agreement of mine. I'm only good when I'm part of a whole, not when I stand on my own. Ooh, for years, I toxically agreed to make myself smaller to make others feel bigger. No more. Yes. Yeah, that makes so much sense. I'm only good when I'm part of a whole. Um, this is reminding me of something that I'm like not forming. I can see like the picture in my head that I'm not forming the story. I'm only good when I'm part of a whole. I had a limiting belief around coaching for a long time. I launched a bunch of courses last year, but for ages I didn't launch any courses, or any course I launched, I would turn it into, a $2,000 program. Because I thought that my content wasn't worth enough unless I was actually coaching. So this would show up too in my group coaching program, where especially early on, I was constantly adding more one-on-one calls to the point where like it was really hard for me to deliver because I was turning a group program into a one-on-one program. But that was like I think that was more of a limiting belief than a toxic agreement. Okay, so with resentments, the beautiful thing is you can start identifying patterns. Same thing with toxic agreements. You can find patterns to take responsibility, and then you can go back to the first step, which is like, oh, I'm the creator of my reality. It is true that my boss paid me less than I'm worth. It's also true that I had multiple bosses who did that, and I'm the common denominator, and I can choose something different now that I'm aware of it. And the last thing is like family and relationships. So just looking at what lessons you learned from your family. I remember the first time I ever remember panicking about money. I was like 6 or 7 years old. We'd moved from one house to another. And I remember my parents constantly talking about, we were like very average middle class, never had a problem with like getting food on the table or anything like that. Very super average, like middle class. And I remember just my parents, like I must have picked up on conversations because I remember asking my mom, like, how much is it going to cost to hire movers? Like, why am I thinking about that at 6 or 7 years old? And I remember they said something like $300, and I just thought it was the end of the world. But like, why was I worried about that? That was passed on to me. It wasn't mine. And so just recognizing that and saying, okay, that's not mine. And then allowing yourself to process these feelings fully. And I like to process them through somatic work, which is breath, sound, movement, and emotional release. So that's the part that a lot of people miss with the limiting beliefs is like, okay, I've identified a limiting belief. I'm going to write an affirmation, or I'm going to write a bridge statement, which a bridge statement is like a quasi affirmation. I'm just going to say that affirmation over and over again, and I'm going to get rid of that limiting belief. But then the part that people miss is actually feeling it. And I'm going to go on one other small tangent here just to explain like how this can trip you up. I have another client who is not on Facebook, so I won't be giving any identifiers here because she's not. Nobody will be talking to her. But we did a somatic session because I've been working with her on business coaching, and I keep seeing her hit walls. And she did not ask me for somatic help or mindset work. She just wanted to like grow the online side of her business. But I'm seeing that she's hitting these invisible walls, and so I decided to gift her a somatic session for Christmas. So we do this somatic session, and she has a goal. We start winding our way. So with a somatic session, you set your intention, and then we decide on an entry point, and then we go into the pocket. So we decide on like, how do we want to get to this goal today? And usually it's by looking at something that is stressing you out. Usually like stress is a little bit more emotionally charged, or something that is negative is more emotionally charged. And when it's more emotionally charged, that means it's active for you, but it's also easier to tap into. So not every somatic session ends up being emotional, but a lot of them do, because that's usually the easiest entry point into tying your mindset to what's happening in your nervous system. Anyway, so we go into the constriction, and I've done this over and over again, so I could see it like a map. Like we talk about this thing, it leads us here. We talk about this thing, it leads us here. We talk about this thing, it leads us here. And the point where it led us is something she's super freaking pissed about. And I'm like, all right, we need to do like, so I don't say we need to do, but in my mind, I'm like, she needs to release this anger because it's keeping her stuck from receiving, because she's not like, it's keeping her stuck. And so I'm like, she's really angry, and I say, what does this anger need? And she like gets out of the pocket. So like, she's like, I feel like I came to the session to do A, and now we're like all the way at Z, which is not where I want to be. And so I explained, like, well, like, I asked you these questions and it led us here and it led us here. And my questions are very non-leading. They're meant to be very open-ended because clients can trust themselves. And it took us to a place where she didn't want to go. So I said, that's why we went here, but we don't have to stay here. So we'll back up. Like, you are sovereign in a somatic session or in any kind of coaching session. You should always be sovereign. Even with just a plain old business coach, you should always be sovereign. So we back up, we get out, and we take the session a different way. But now I know she didn't want a somatic session, but I knew that she was blocked. I'm like, the actions that you're taking are blocked. I can like feel it. And now she has the anger, it's still stuck. And so when you can release those emotions though, like if you're angry at all of your bosses and you just identify that on a piece of paper, it can still sometimes be stuck in your body. So allowing yourself to fully process those, and not everything has to be a big deal. Like allowing yourself to fully feel something doesn't always mean you're going to be in tears or really angry. It could just be like a second of feeling frustrated. Is this all helpful? That was another tangent, but it just felt like so real on like something I was sensing very clearly. Or if that person had been able to release that, they wouldn't have this wall that they're kind of stuck at uncomfortably. Kate said, I have had to do a lot of work around money. I grew up really poor. My mom always told us we were broke. Then she would take us on shopping sprees and with her credit cards. Yes. Oh, there's like 4 money patterns right there. That's also very relatable. When my parents were married, like they were always talking about how broke we were. And then my parents got divorced, and then my mom was actually broke. But then she didn't act like she was broke. That was the thing was like when she was actually broke, she started acting like she wasn't broke. And then that caused other problems that didn't impact me as much, but did impact her. I feel like I went into too much detail about the somatic session that we had to backtrack, but I was trying to illustrate a point, so hopefully that was helpful. My family was the same with money. My husband recently reflected back to me that I do that to him. Yeah, and it's funny, Lindsay, because I do that to my husband too. My husband is like, he's really generous, so he'll like, and I don't love this, but he'll, without talking to me, donate a few $100s to like an animal rescue that we support. And I'm like, well, I mean, I definitely want to give generously, but like, I wish we could have talked about it. But I'm the one who's like, my husband also just bought a leaf blower because he's tired of the dogs tracking leaves in all the time. Where I'm the person who's like, I don't want to spend $100 on a leaf blower. I'll just let the house be a mess because it just seems like something we don't need. Yeah, I'm the one who like, well, I'll also like, I love to go out to eat. We go out to eat all the time, but then like buying groceries, we eat like a ton of rice and beans. So just maybe these are just examples of duality. Okay, step number 3 is learn how to change your frequency over time. These first 2 steps were kind of epic. I promise they're not all going to take 20 minutes. But step number 3 is learning how to change your frequency over time. So step number 1, if you're just catching on or if you're in the middle of this, like, where have we been? You have to recognize you're the creator of your own reality. You have to address limiting beliefs and give them space. And this isn't just like writing affirmations. This is like finding all the patterns and then getting them all out of your body. And then step number 3 is learning how to change your frequency over time. This is where we get a little bit more woo-woo, where I'm not going to be like referencing science books, but just stay with me and take what you like, leave the rest. So you have both. This made a lot of sense to me. We're like in law of attraction and manifesting. I hear people talk about like frequency and vibration and they have to like raise your vibration. But what made more sense to me is that we have both frequency and vibration. And frequency is more stable but can change over time. Whereas vibration, it changes all the time with your mood, with your emotions, with your environment, with your experiences. And so with manifesting, I was told I have to have a high vibration. I didn't know there was a difference between vibration and frequency. And so anytime I felt anxious, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting into the negative vortex and I'm going to ruin all the sources of my income. And I'm going to become destitute and live on the street and homeless for the rest of my life. Like when I had a negative thought, that was literally the track I would go down in my anxiety cyclone. It was like, It was like, oh my gosh, I'm anxious. And then like I would just rapidly be like homeless. Um, so it was really helpful to know we have a frequency and a vibration, and they're both a process. And so then, and I just learned this terminology recently. So what helped me is that like it's possible, like learning duality, which I'm sure you've heard me talk about at least a little bit, even just today I've already mentioned it. But learning duality was like the biggest game changer for me to start learning how to manifest. It was like, oh, I can feel like crap. I can be depressed, I can feel anxious, and I can also still be in a high frequency and doing good for the world at the same time. And so then when you remove this like all or nothing mentality, it just opened up my world so much. So your frequency is more stable, and our goal is to raise your frequency over time. So to become an energetic match for the things you want more and more over time. Whereas your vibration is going to be all over the place. It's going to be impacted by your mood, by your uterus, by your emotions, your environment, your experiences, other people in the room. If you're not protecting your energy, your vibration is just all over the place. But our goal is to improve your frequency over time, which will improve the quality of your life and your experiences and your ability to manifest. So when we talk about becoming an energetic match for the things that we want, we're not talking about the vibrations that can change all the time. We're talking about the frequency that is a little bit more stable. And then again, it is possible to feel high vibe while also being worried. Like both of those things can be true. Hello, Heather. So practicing the duality and mastering this duality, this, in my opinion, is like what a lot of people are not explaining well in manifesting. And this to me is like the key to a trauma-informed approach to the law of attraction. Like the trauma-informed approach to law of attraction is like high vibe while learning how to feel bad things without getting stuck on them. As someone who did speech, sound science, vibration and frequency are the same, but volume is different. Interesting. So maybe our frequency vibration is stable over time, but our volume fluctuates with input and context. I think you can totally, I think that works too. I didn't study speech and sound, but I'm a musician, obviously. Like these are not just decoration. And I took some music theory classes, and I think that has aided me somewhat in somatic work and also tuning into my body, because I can feel vibration. Like when you are, this is only somewhat related to what you're saying, Megan, but I still think it's interesting. So like when you're harmonizing with music, so somebody's singing a note and you want to sing either the same note or a complementary note, you can feel that vibration. You can physically, once you learn it, you can physically feel when you're on the same note and physically feel when it's complementary. And that's when I tune my instruments, I don't need a tuner. I can just feel it. There was a very famous artist. His last name is Chin, and I can't remember his first name. But he was on stage in front of probably 500 people, and he wanted to play a guitar. And I was so sick when I was at this performance, but he was like, does anybody in the audience know how to tune a guitar? And silence. Finally, I was like, dang it. I was like, I know I can tune that guitar. So I go up on stage in front of 500 people, and I have the worst cold ever. This is well before 2020. And I tuned this person's guitar because I could feel the vibration. Anyway, so the next step, which I misnumbered my steps, so who knows what step it is? Because I have 1, 2, 3, 6, 5, 6, 7. So I guess we have 7 steps, but there's 2 6s. The next step is to use money as a mirror. So this is third level of limiting beliefs. The first level of limiting beliefs is the actual just limiting beliefs and affirmations. The next level is money mapping, looking at toxic agreements and resentments. And the next step is using money as a mirror. And you might be able to do this a few steps ago, but this is just the process. This is what I went through. Money often mirrors. I've heard this from multiple people, and I heard it I don't know if the second or third time from Carrie Michelle, who I mentioned earlier in this training too. I heard this from her 2 weeks ago. But it was so insightful to me, and it reminded me of a somatic session that I was a client in. But money often mirrors your most toxic relationships. Money often mirrors your most toxic relationships. So I had such a crazy moment where I was in a somatic. I don't know if I was in a somatic session, or I think I was in a somatic session when I was in the certification. And I was leaning into the anxiety that I had around it was the anxiety cyclone, but it was like I had this worry around money about, and I forget, it doesn't matter what triggered it, but I had this trigger. And when I was leaning into it and feeling it and like we're in the pocket and doing the work, I realized it's the exact same physical sensation that I had when I was in relationships, especially in my 20s, as an anxious attached style. So I don't know if you guys know about attachment styles, but there's a book called Attached, which is a really easy read. It has these amazing quizzes in it, which will tell you what your attachment style is and the attachment style of your partner. So you take both quizzes, they don't take it. And you can see what the attachment style is for both you and your partner if you have one. And I'm an anxious attached style. And so what happens with anxious attached is it is what it sounds like. You're in a relationship, but you're constantly afraid, you're constantly feeling unstable, unsteady, that they're going to leave or whatever. And so you feel anxious, and there's all these patterns and behaviors that happen with that. But there was one relationship in particular, and I was probably 20 or 21 years old in this relationship, where I kind of knew that it needed to end, and knew that it was going to end. And like, he broke up with me, but then like we kind of didn't break up. Like when you're in your 20s, you guys know how it is. In your 20s. I'm sure you've had relationships that like broke up, didn't break up, stay together again, break up again. Anyway, this person though, I really cared about him, but I remember the physical sensation in my body and during this relationship was like so intensely anxious. And I realized that this particular pattern that I was trying to break with money, it was the exact same physical sensation as that relationship that was like very chaotic, very anxious. This like intense feeling it was going to leave. And so the lesson for me, there's two lessons for that. Number one is like looking at money as a mirror, like, and looking at relationship as a mirror. To the fact that there's something else going on. That was like something else that showed me. But the second thing that's really interesting about somatic work in particular is that the connections don't always make sense. My relationship had nothing to do with money or finances. I didn't have any financial worries or stresses at that time. I was still in college and I had a job and like things were good. I wasn't, and so it's so good. But it was the same feeling in my nervous system of like, it's gonna leave, it's gonna dry up, it won't always be here. And I can't control it. That was like the feeling I had, was like a loss of control, that it was gonna dissipate and disappear and I was gonna be alone. So some of the somatic work that I did to help with that was just leaning into safety, learning into support. Like there's lots of things I did to just feel secure. And that made me feel secure in relationships too. Although I ended up, the interesting thing about attachment styles is like 50% of the population is secure attached. This is roughly 50% secure attached, 25 anxious attached, 25 avoidant. And then there's another part that is, I think it's called either chaotic or it's just anxious avoidant, but 50% of the population is secure. So if you are partnered with someone who is secure, it'll shift. If you're one of the other three styles, it'll help you to shift over time. So luckily, even without knowing about attachment styles, I somehow found myself married to a very secure attached person. And I'm happy to report that I'm now a sane person in relationships, in my relationship. The other interesting thing about my anxious attached, like, or the mirror that I see with money and relationships that I have, is that with the anxious attached style and feeling so anxious about the relationship or people leaving, there's also this side of me that can become very avoidant as a protective mechanism. And that showed up in my money too. Where I was so afraid I wasn't going to have money anymore that even though I had a $60,000 month with a lot of profit, I didn't want to look at my money. And so I would meet with my accountant and they're like, well, how much money do you think you're going to make next year? Or like, what do you think is going to come in next quarter? And I'm like, I have no freaking idea. We're like, now I'm projecting a quarter out, not just like, I don't know exactly what I'm going to have coming in, but I have a lot more payment plans intentionally. I don't incentivize painful as much as I used to because I like the stability. So if you want to just look at this like money as a mirror, like a quick check that you can do if you're having a hard time tapping into the stories I'm sharing is like, how do you feel when people give you gifts? How do you feel when people pay you money? How do you feel when you give gifts? And how do you feel when you give money or pay money? You can just start kind of looking at those things. So number whatever this is, even though we were just on number 6, now we're on number 5 because I misnumbered. So the next step is I'm going to turn this into a blog post, probably, or something. So you'll have the steps somewhere. But make the journey the destination. I wrote about this on social media this week where like you have to, and this is when I talk about the number one way to like collapse timelines, and I hear people talking about collapsing timelines, I'm like curious what other people teach for collapsing timelines. Like I haven't taken like a lot of like manifesting courses. So, but this is what I feel like collapsed timelines for me. So, but I'm curious, like what else collapses timelines? I just love that phrase so much. Like I want to collapse all the timelines. So I don't know what other people mean when they say this, but when I say collapsing timelines, this is the number one tool that's helped me. And that is to make the journey the destination. And another way to say this is chase the feeling. So there's 2 reasons why chasing the feeling or the journey is more important than the end goal. And like the end goal is always going to change. And part of this is just a survival mechanism. Like your brain is always looking for things to change. And so if your goal is 30K months, 30K months, 30K months, 30K months, and at 30K months for a million years, as soon as you get close to 30K months, you're probably going to change the goal. For most people, unless you're already doing this work. So like, you know, some of the clients I have where they're like, this is how much money I want to make. And after that, like I have another colleague who she reached her goal. She wanted to be a full-time entrepreneur. She wanted her husband to be out of his job. And she wanted him to be able to stay home with the kids and they have a little bit of overflow. And then she reached that goal, but she didn't know how to enjoy it. And everyone around her was pushing for bigger months. So she thought she had to too. And she ended up unintentionally burning it all down because she didn't know how to chase the feeling or enjoy the journey. So if I had been working with her at that time, I would have said, you know, like now we have to find new things to go after. If you don't want to keep chasing in work, we have to find something else for you to chase in life that is joyful. So you have to chase the feeling. And there's 2 reasons to chase the feeling. Number 1 is that your body, in order for you to have 30K months, 50K months, 100K months, you have to learn what that feels like in your body. Or when it happens, your body is going to be like, oh, we're not safe. And it's going to try to bring you back to stasis. Is that the word, stasis? It's going to try to bring you back to your previous state of success or lack thereof. So your body has to feel safe when you get to 50K months if you want to keep having 50K months. And then the second thing this does is when you chase the feeling, or chase the positive feeling, it also helps you raise your frequency, or raise your vibration, because you're going to be focused on having it already. So I'm gonna stick a pin in it for that. If you guys have any questions about it, that's all the notes I have. But the question I have for you here that I think would be helpful is, and then I'm gonna have an exercise for you at the very end, where I'll give you specific steps on chasing the feeling. So what is something you have now that you thought you would never have? I think we forget to do this. And like if my friend who like got her husband out of the job, had a full-time job, like everything was taken care of, and then she accidentally sabotaged it. That was something she thought she would never have. And like, what if she'd taken a moment to be like, oh my God, I have the thing. It's like one of the things that helped me turn things around when I was feeling really, really low even before things got better, the thing that helped me turn things around was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing it. Like I'd been so down on myself for wanting to be here and only being here. And finally one day I just woke up and I'm like, oh my gosh, I am sitting on my couch all day in my office. I'm not having to go in the office. I don't have to report to someone else. I can change my mind about my work anytime I want to. Um, like I working 40 hours a week is just such a what's the word I'm looking for? Scam. Such a scam. I just read an article on this morning where like people have become, and I can't remember what this article is. Can I find it easily? No. The Financial Diet. So the Financial Diet is a $1 million company that went to 25. They went to 4-day work weeks, and they cited a study. So if you just find the Financial Diet, you can find this study. But they cited a study where people in the last like 20 years have become 34% more productive. So if you translate that into your work week, then we should be working maximum 27 hours a week. Because over the last 20 years, we've become 34% more productive. So working 40 hours a week, and if you work in an office now, you know this. You know that you're in the office for 40 hours a week, but like Steve comes by your desk and chats you up for 30 minutes a day. Or you're all in a meeting for an hour and you're just shooting the shit for 15 minutes in the first part of the meeting. So there's, so working 40 hours a week is a scam. And there's some of you who I know, like, if there's one client who I have who's working close to 40 hours a week right now, and like we will get you there, we will get you down. The Financial Diet is the website that went to 4-day work week, and they have a blog post that cites the study that I just mentioned for that little rabbit hole if you want to look where that study is. But that's like, how did I get on this tangent? Oh, because that's something that I really, really wanted, was like, I do not want to sit in an office for 40 hours a week. It just feels like the worst. It feels so arbitrary. It takes so much time. Then I have to drive home. And like, that's one thing I can always feel in my body, is just gratitude for the fact that I get to be in this office all day. I love it so much. That's something I can always tap into. Like something else that, this is just a funny example, but when I was in college, college was first stressful because I had a full-time job. I was in school full-time. And I remember getting to the last part of school, like writing all these papers, taking all these exams. And when I graduated, I felt this huge sense of relief. No more homework, no more deadlines, no more exams, no more studying. I'm so grateful. I still, to this day, feel that relief in my body. And that was, gosh, how old am I? It wasn't 20 years ago, but we're getting close. So step number 6, and this is the actual step number 6, not the fake number 6 I mentioned earlier, is to focus on tiny changes and pattern disrupts. Before I say this, I'll just say, let me look at the comments. So one thing you thought you would have that you thought you would never have. Happiness. I thought I was 100% permanently broken. Any happiness I might ever have might be fleeting or fluke or fake, but I'm genuinely happy now in a consistent, sustainable way. I honestly can't believe it. That's freaking awesome. I manifested my honey, time, flexibility, work freedom. Yes. I want more freedom, but wow, yes, I've manifested a ton over the years. And how does that feel in your body? Like when you close your eyes and you think about how grateful you are for those things. Like for me, when I think about the fact that like I can sit on my couch all day, and I do get dressed most days, but like I'm often in my pajamas. When I think about that, I can sit in my pajamas all day. I feel it like a buzziness in my chest. So where do you feel that in your body? Freedom to do what I love. Ages ago, working in a toxic job, it was hard to imagine. And I was constantly, after leaving, having to keep myself from taking the same kind of jobs because I knew I'd be just as miserable. Yes, Maddie, someone in my mastermind who, before coming to the mastermind, she had a full-time job. She quit it. And then she got a contract job that kind of tricked her into becoming a W-2. And she was like, how did this happen? And since quitting, she's had multiple opportunities to like do other W-2 things. And I'm like, how does that feel in your body? Because it kind of sounds like that thing you're trying not to do. I never thought I'd be able to stay home with my baby for a year and a half. Yes. And that, gosh, that makes me almost like feel emotional. Like, because I know people who just had to spend, they were home for 2 weeks or whatever on maternity leave and then put their newborns in daycare because they didn't have another option. Like, that I think is just huge. It makes me feel emotional. So so number 6 is focus on tiny changes and pattern disrupts. You have to make the time to work on this. So manifesting, it is learning to lean back and receive, but it takes more self-accountability than anything you've ever done. Because you can't, like, in order to manifest consistently, you have to do the work of looking at the patterns and holding space for the junk. And I know there's plenty of rich people who are not doing deep work, but I'm talking about if you want to absolutely be obsessed with your life and feel totally at peace and then also be rich, then you want to do it this way. But the one thing I want to remind you is that you can make the tiniest changes. What's an example of this? Just the tiniest changes. So pattern interrupt on, like, I'm working 40 hours a week and I know I don't need to be working 40 hours a week. But I'm afraid if I just go to a 4-day work week, your nervous system might become too dysregulated. So when I talk about a dysregulated nervous system, I haven't explained this on this call today at all, but you have a window of tolerance where, like, you feel safe and comfortable. And there's things you can do to expand that window of tolerance. So intensive breath work can expand that window of tolerance, like doing somatic work, cold showers, like certain kinds of physical exercise. There's things you can do to expand your window of tolerance. But generally speaking, we have this window of tolerance where we feel safe and we want to push to the edge. So you'll hear coaches talking about, like, being like edgy, like this feels edgy for me. They're talking about being close to that window of tolerance. And then if we go outside of that window of tolerance too fast, you can dysregulate your nervous system. So when I had a $60,000 month in 2021, that was like, I was so grateful, but it was like I hadn't done any work to prepare myself for that mentally. And so I ended up sabotaging that, where I entered the wrong checking account information to get paid for it and delayed, $35,000 worth of payments for like 3 months instead of having it in 2 weeks. So you can make, when it comes to, when I talk about being dysregulated, I'm talking about you've gone outside of that window of tolerance too fast. And when you, like, that's what trauma is just doing anything too fast that you're not ready for. That's why trauma, it can be something really big, or it could be something small, like a fender bender, or somebody like spooking you. Like, you can have little T trauma from something like that. So talking about, like, let's prepare your nervous system for a 4-day work week. If you've been working 60 hours forever, then maybe you just take a half day on Fridays. Maybe you don't get to your desk until 10 a.m. every day. Just something small to start, small, tiny little changes. The other thing I want to say is that you don't have to force gratitude. I haven't talked about gratitude at all today because I feel like we all know that you need to be grateful. But since I haven't said it, let me just say it, that feeling grateful, and I will talk about this in step number 7, is like, it's your biggest, I didn't write this word down. It's your fastest way. Where did I not talk about this at all? I did not write about gratitude at all in this training. It's the fastest way to catapult your manifesting, to feel grateful. So if you're not doing some kind of daily gratitude list, I know I made an Instagram reel poo-pooing on gratitude lists. So other lists that I like to write, if gratitude lists feel boring or trite, which they can, because a lot of us haven't taken them seriously, or it feels forced because we've been taught to do it that way. If you don't want to do a gratitude list, you can do a list of, like, here's the ways I feel supported. Here's things that make me feel safe. Here's things that make me feel satisfaction, whatever. But don't force the gratitude. So, like, if you're trying to manifest something, you're doing meditations every day, but you get stuck on a limiting belief that's really painful, it's okay for you to spend time with that. It's okay for you to not work on manifesting for weeks, to sit with that grief, to release it somatically. And what's important here is that you do this intentionally. We don't want to like poo-poo on ourselves and other people for 2 weeks at a time, but you want to let yourself feel and grieve. So I lost a cat about a month ago that was like, I knew that he was important to me. I don't think I knew how important he was to me. And for 2 weeks and maybe more, I was feeling grateful. I was living my life. I was coaching clients. I was still productive and doing things, but I wasn't really working on heavily manifesting or goal setting. I was feeling my grief. And that is not going to mess up your manifesting, to give those limiting beliefs space. If I had done the money mapping exercises I mentioned earlier, and I had had those resentments come up about bosses or against my parents, and I was just really pissed about those, like, it's okay for me to just like work on that. Because if you try to write gratitude lists and feel gratitude, and if you try to get into the positive vibe of manifesting, but you're really just freaking pissed at someone or at a situation, it's going to get your wires all crossed. So just like let yourself feel. And it is possible to feel like doo-doo and to manifest at the same time. But if you're and you'll feel this when you do like the exercise I show later. I'm gonna do the meditation in a separate video. So step number 7, I'm gonna do it in a separate video because I do have another meeting. But if you're trying to do the manifesting meditation I'm gonna show, and you're just feeling like super angry, then like maybe take a pause and just feel the anger. This actually happened to me yesterday. I was feeling sad and angry about something, and I was like trying to manifest, and I'm like, oh, I just need to like feel this for a second. So I got angry, and then of course my anger made me cry. It's like super frustrating, right? And then I was able to do the meditation later, but I realized like, oh, I'm just like not feeling great. I'm trying to feel great, and I need to let myself just not feel great right now. And that doesn't have to be, there can be a reason for it or not. My moods tend to be impacted by the moon a lot, and not everybody's are, but that was so helpful for me to know, because every time I was in a weird mood, I just had like I would think like, what's the thing I can fix? Or sometimes it's just like, the moon is weird, so I'm weird, and I'm just gonna like let myself be angry and cry and then move on instead of making it mean something. It doesn't always have to mean something. Maddie said, I used to be jealous of people working with their laptops in coffee shops. I never do that. I prefer working from my couch, but I could. Yeah, I've never been a coffee shop vibe person either. I mean, I like coffee shops, but I don't really work productively from them. And that might be because I'm talking all day. Like a lot of my work is talking to people. Because I have ADHD, my nervous system needs lots of stimulation to feel safe. Because I'm autistic, it has to be the exact right stimulation or I lose it. That is tough. For years, I couldn't get into that window of tolerance. I just jumped between over and understimulated every few hours. But now I found my work, and it's gloriously stimulating. It keeps me right where I need to be. I love that so much. You're going to help so many people, Megan. You've heard of inner child healing, but I gotta say, I love inner teen healing. The rage, LOL, yes. I think that the client that I was working with on the anger, I don't know what age hers is, but I suspect it's not adult. And that is like, a lot of us have done therapy. Like I feel like a lot of people do therapy, or like where it's less stigmatized than it used to be. And therapy is amazing, but even if you go to therapy and talk a lot about your anger, it doesn't always necessarily mean that you've really like released it. And you also don't have to do somatic healing work. Like there's many different paths to get to one end. This is just the path that I'm taking, and the path that many of you are attracted to, at least somewhat, or you wouldn't be here. But I have an identical twin sister who's manifesting, and she hasn't done any somatic healing work. She's done a different path, and that's her path. She does have lots of healing work, but it's all totally different than the kind of healing work I've done. Okay, so I'm short on time. I want to dedicate I'm just going to make a separate video for the meditation. So I'm going to end this here so I can get ready for my next call. I do have a few minutes if you guys have any other questions. The next video is just going to be a somatic manifesting meditation that you can do every single day. Actually, it probably makes sense for that to be on its own anyway, so that you don't have to watch an hour-long video before getting to the meditation. Thank you guys so much for the comments and the engagement. This is like I'll go live. You'll see, like, there's lots of my videos that have almost no views. I'll go live and teach and do whatever when people aren't here, when they're not engaging. But when you are here and someone is engaging, it is a lot more fun for me. So I just really appreciate you guys being here. And you'll be getting lots of content. Elizabeth says, thank you. I need more of this. And I'll be doing lots of this year. My goal is to, well, I won't tell you my goal, but maybe I'll say in another video. Okay, so that's it for this training. Hopefully this is helpful. I didn't talk that much about gratitude, but that is going to be in the meditation. Question, how do you engage with somatic work when you're happy? I feel like I can't find an opening unless I'm sad or upset. Yeah. So I'm curious, like, Megan, if I were to ask you, like, okay, so you just mentioned this great example of now that I found my work, and it's gloriously stimulating, it keeps me right where I need to be. That feels like it could be a big feeling, like a big positive feeling. So with somatic work, like when you have a positive feeling, like it's the same way as a negative feeling. So close your eyes, think of the thing that's making you happy. And in the meditation, you're going to always start by writing a gratitude list. And it's like a gratitude list of things you're really grateful for. And they don't have to be big things. Coffee shows up, because I do my gratitude list in the morning. Coffee shows up on my list so often, but I can always, I'm like, when I think about starting my morning without coffee, like what if this coffee wasn't here? It just brings me back to like how grateful I am for the coffee. But when you have like so the gratitude list I'll show you in the meditation, but thinking of the statement I just mentioned from your comment earlier, if you close your eyes, where do you feel that in your body? But that's the first step to engaging with somatic work, is feeling it in your body. And then the next step is expanding it, which we'll do in the meditation. Actually, and this is in Boundaries Bliss and Calm the Fuck Down Frameworks, those two courses. Have a lot of somatic exercises in them, especially the Calm Down Frameworks course has a ton of somatic exercises in it, and a lot of them focus on the positive. So if you feel a lot of emotion in your hands, I would like feel the feeling, and then once you feel it in your hands, see if you can make it even bigger, and make it even bigger, and make it even bigger. And then in the meditation, we're gonna do some things with that energy. But if you can make that feeling bigger and then think, what else reminds me of this feeling? A physical object, an experience, a person, a place. Because then that, whatever you think of as like the thing that makes me think of this, becomes what's called a resource you can tap into when you want more of that feeling. So I had a client who was feeling a really positive feeling. I don't even remember what client it was, but she was feeling a really positive feeling. And I said, what else reminds you of this feeling? And she said, hugs from blank, and mentioned a name that I don't remember. I'm like, great. So like, it would be possible for you to like maybe get a hug from that person that you live with if you need that resource, or give yourself a hug and lean into that feeling. That's why when I was grieving my cat, I like, one of the things I really missed from him was like the heavy feeling of him in my lap. And so I had like this stuffed animal that I would sit with and grieve, and that was a resource for me. Yeah, that makes sense. You did similar somatic work when you were taking theater classes in college. That's funny. I didn't do any somatic work in my theater classes in college, but maybe I didn't go far enough. I quit theater in high school, and I only took one class in college for various reasons. Elizabeth is my note taker. She is a former nurse. So if you guys need any of the resources I mentioned, you can scan through Elizabeth's comments. And Elizabeth, I really appreciate that about you. Yeah. All right. Thank you guys so much. If you have any other questions, I'll respond to them after and the replay. And thank you again for being here. And I will see you very soon. And I'll post that meditation by the end of the week. I'll post it in the group. And this video will be pinned in the resources in the Mindful Marketing Mavens. We have like 150 resources now. So this will be there. Yeah, charting notes. All right, guys, thank you so much. I'll see you in that meditation by the end of the week, and have a good rest of your day. Happy New Year.